Hello again. So here we are now in Unit 9, progressing smoothly through this course, hopefully. Um, we saw last week a very interesting crusade, the Third Crusade, that ultimately is in response to the conquest of Jerusalem. And the Kingdom of Jerusalem now exists really as a kind of rump state. It's a kingdom in exile. And that's basically the condition it will have, with a brief interruption, as we'll see, all the way until 1292 in the fall of Acre. But in the meantime, you get a number of crusades. All of them, the numbered crusades, really, are attempts to reconquer Jerusalem, restore the kingdom of Jerusalem in some way or another, and other crusades directed elsewhere in the meantime. So, this week is about the Fourth Crusade, one of the, I guess you could say, second attempt, since the Third Crusade also falls under this category, to restore the Kingdom of Jerusalem, restore really just Christian control over Jerusalem and the surrounding areas. The Fourth Crusade is, in my opinion, one of the most interesting. I've always thought it was particularly fascinating, maybe the most interesting of the Crusades, because it, well, misses, to put it simply. The Crusades' intent is for Egypt, and along the lines that Richard the Lionheart had laid out in the course of the Third Crusade. And they never get there. They never get close. They end up in Byzantium, in Constantinople, of all places, which is really quite a surprising development that requires a lot of explanation. But first, let's frame this crusade a little bit in the context of the person who calls it, a pope named Innocent III. Innocent III is absolutely fascinating. Definitely takes a prominent role in the history of the Crusades. Really, the number of crusades he launches in all directions is startling when you look at it. I mean, there is not in anything like chronological order here. The Fourth Crusade that he launches and organizes, he lays the groundwork for the Fifth Crusade to follow up on that. He will launch a political crusade into Sicily, which is very interesting, and you'll see next week. An Albigensian crusade against the Cathars in southern France, which competes, for my opinion, of most interesting crusades. Um, Plays a role in the articulation of the Northern Crusades to convert pagans up in the Baltic. Uh, Plays a major role in reframing the Spanish Reconquista as a crusade. Basically, he stands in Rome, spins around in a circle, and launches a crusade in every direction. I think that's a pretty fair way to put it. Definitely a crusade happy pope, and his ultimate ambition in the crusades is, of course, to be the one to recapture Jerusalem. That's what he's most interested in. Now, Innocent was absurdly powerful as a pope. He was only 37 years old when he became pope, but he was easily the most powerful pope of the whole Middle Ages. Indeed, depending on how you're looking at it, the most powerful pope of all time, it could be said. It's kind of the culmination of this long buildup of papal imperialism, of papal power over secular power, that could trace its origins to the 11th century church reform, and perhaps more than that, the investiture controversy of the 11th and early 12th century, during which the church had fought for independence from secular authority. But in the intervening period, gradually the church began to assert dominance over secular authority. Claims like plenitudo potestatis, the fullness of power, that anything that is conceivably a moral issue or an issue with moral implications, including politics, is the purview of the Pope. The argument of the two swords theory, that there's two kinds of power, secular power and religious power, but these are not, it's not an argument for separation of church and state at all. The Pope wields both swords, in fact. He wields religious power directly and secular power indirectly through kings who do his bidding. And no pope lived to that ideal more than Innocent III. Innocent III, operating under this idea of plenitudo potestatis, exerts his authority in every possible dimension. The persecution of heretics, the Fourth Lateran Council, which really reaffirms papal authority over all aspects of the church and even of the Christian populace as a whole. For the first time in 1215, for example, legislating that all people who call themselves Christian have to make confession at least once a year and do penance for their sins. On that social legislation, Innocent, tries to outlaw usury. He tries to set fair wages and prices. He legislates, what you can wear according to your station in life. He legislates down to the level of which prostitutes you can sleep with, because he's really interested in, policing relations, interfaith relations in particular. So social intervention at every level, political intervention in a number of fascinating ways. If we look at England, for example, John the First, Bad King John, John Lackland, John Softsword gets a bad reputation. He's the guy from the Robin Hood tales. Brother of Richard, who had a bad deal in life just because Richard squandered all of England's money, but goes up against Innocent over this issue over who should be the next Archbishop of Canterbury. And Innocent uses a new sort of tool, interdict, which forbids everyone in the kingdom, every priest in the kingdom, from administering any sacraments until an issue is resolved politically. So if you have a baby and it dies, well, there's no limbo yet. Too bad, your baby's going to hell. So a lot of social and political pressure on the king. Well, John will fold, and England becomes a papal fief. The Pope owns England. This allows Innocent to cancel Magna Carta in 1216, the year after it's formed. He gets his friend in the Archbishop of Canterbury. He has total power over England. And that's just one example. Innocent's full of this kind of stuff, and you'll meet more of it when we talk about the Fifth Crusade. But for the Fourth Crusade, he does a couple of interesting things with this. To fund it, he permits the sale of indulgences for one of the first times. Rather than going on crusade yourself, if you're not capable of that, you can pay for someone else to go on crusade, and you both get the crusading indulgence. This raises considerable funds. He asserts that the merchant city of Venice, perhaps the most wealthy and prosperous of all merchant cities, has to suspend all shipping and business for a year in order to refit all of their ships to be troop transports. And remarkably, they do that. Now, they're supposed to be compensated by the Crusaders, who, turns out, don't show up in as great of numbers as they're supposed to. This is what gets the Crusaders to attack the Christian city Zara, which is under the reign in the kingdom of a Christian king who's actually himself supposed to be a Crusader. This ultimately will head them off towards Byzantium, and along the way, Innocent will excommunicate the entire army. Again, the kind of power he wields is insane. Long story short, 1204, Constantinople falls to the Crusaders. Innocent's reaction, which you'll get to see, is mostly positive. He forgives the Crusaders. He thinks this is fantastic. The Great Schism has been healed. Constantinople has been returned to the fold under the Pope. You have a Latin Empire in Constantinople now that will last till 1261, with the Byzantine Empire continuing mostly in rump state form in the meantime. But he is upset, and you'll get to see why. It has to do with the failure of them to go on and conquer Jerusalem, and so he'll have to organize the Fifth Crusade as a result. Innocent III is a major character in all of this, of course, and you should look at it. But the other big impact of the Fourth Crusade is that, the Crusaders, when they sack Constantinople in 1204, do not do so gently or respectfully. I don't know how they could have done it gently or respectfully, but the atrocities they commit are very memorable. You'll get to read Nikitas Choniates, who writes about this event from the Byzantine perspective, who is shocked at the sorts of misdeeds committed by the Crusaders, their theft of relics, their desecration of shrines, not to mention, of course, all of the murderous rapine activities that fall under the consequences of most sieges. This will be the moment that great schism of 1054 becomes fundamentally unsolvable, right? This is remembered throughout history. It's one of the major grievances always lodged by the Greek Orthodox Church against the Roman Catholic Church. And, you do get an apology for this in, if I recall correctly, 2003, but too little too late, right? So the long-term echoes of 1204 will be substantial by all accounts. And you can see, again, the sort of shift in perspective that comes as you get these preachers justifying the attack on Constantinople by saying the Byzantines aren't really Christian because they don't respect Roman authority, read the Pope, that they're like dogs, worse than Jews, as they put all of these things to justify it. And that, too, will have a long-term impact, because in Venice, a major slave city involved in the Mediterranean-wide slave trade, they start to treat Byzantines as non-Christians and therefore liable to slavery, and start to enslave Byzantine people to work in their houses and ship Byzantines around as though they were any other kind of non-Christian. So, deep, deep scars from the Fourth Crusade, and you get to read all about it. Proceed. I can't say have fun. It's not fun, but proceed.